Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the Hartford Board of School Directors. It is March the 27th, 2024. Sorry. We can do a third. Do I need to start all over?
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. This is welcome you to the Hartford Board of School Directors. This is March the 27th, 2024. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Are there any changes, additions of the agenda?
No.
Doug, you have any changes? Okay, good.
I'd like to move that we accept the agenda as presented. Second.
Thank you very much. We'll go to governance process, fiscal 25-20 revised budget presentation and discussion. Peter.
Actually, I wondered if, I should have said this in the first item, but the bond folks were wondering, since they guessed, if they could reverse that order. Oh. I don't know.
Would you like to revise your,
Well,
or just
let's just
do it? All right. Sure.
We're not changing the agenda, we're just changing the order.
Right.
The order.
Okay, absolutely. So fiscal year 25 bond presentation and discussion. Sarah Campbell.
I'm gonna read my notes off my slides and we'll run the actual slides, Tom.
Okay. Yeah.
Awesome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Campbell. I'm from White River Junction, and I'm here once again to talk about the school bond proposal and why we would like your support for this. This isn't my first time giving this speech, and it probably won't be my last, but I'm gonna take a different tack today. I'm not gonna throw a lot of words on PowerPoint slides or overwhelm you with statistics. I really want to talk about why I, as a parent of 2 kids in this district, and a project manager involved in this kind of work, really believe in the importance of this bond. When we first moved to the Upper Valley, Hartford was our top choice for a place to settle down. We believe in the community, the opportunities it offered, and the potential for our children's education. When we first moved here, there was uncertainty about closing the White River School. Like that was a big flex moment in our district, and now we stand at another crucial juncture. Next slide. So there are 3 main components to the bond: the 5-year schedule for capital renewal, the development of master facility plan, and the district growth and catchment study. I'm gonna pass to Jonathan for the first piece, which is the 5-year capital renewal.
You can stay with us.
Okay.
I'm standing over against.
So I've had this conversation enough times, noteless tonight. So if I missed something, it's probably to your benefit. We've talked a lot philosophically about the need for a bond, about the need for capital renewal, and we seem to end up with specifics. So I thought I'd start with some specifics and then work into the philosophy. So the first slide we have there is just that general infrastructure. When people come to vote on Saturday, that's probably the door they're going to walk into. We all go in and out of it. I do dozens of times a week and rarely stop to look at the condition around it. It's a small example, but the metal framing around the windows is rotted through. It's not repairable. It's not a paint job anymore. And I started with that to just kind of give a general sense of this is, you know, as I walk through the district, I think about the big picture, but I also am drawn to these little details. And you see them everywhere. So this is just kind of an example of that. I don't know exactly when that glass hallway was built, but that's all original components, and it's just outlived its useful life. We're going to replace it at some point in some way. And the way this kind of ties into Sarah's slant is What I have to decide on a daily, weekly, quarterly, annual basis is, do we replace in kind, do we rebuild in kind? Or do we approach this work with an eye towards the future? Are we gonna renovate the gym? Are we gonna have some enhancement to athletic facilities? In which case, this glass hallway might not be where we spend thousands of dollars to fix old stuff. So that's a pretty concrete example. The next slide is, if you came in that way, you walked next to the north stairs, which is a concrete structure that acts as a retaining wall for the whole upper parking lot and covers all of the utility entrances to this building as well as the stormwater system. And it is just, as you can see, compromised beyond repair. The water leaches right through it. This is actually the door into room 242 right there. Water has basically just beaten the concrete years and years ago and has now leached through and got to the point where it's getting past that whole exterior structure, is freezing and thawing and peeling it off the building. And now we have water coming into the building itself, and have probably for many years, as the next slide shows. We go into the basement. This is, for those of you who don't know, it is lovingly referred to as the catacombs. That is the dirt basement under this building. I can say in all the years of working in this field, I've never seen a dirt basement under a building this big, so we are unique in that. These are the posts that support the auto body shop. Basically, this whole end of the building right under us right now are these posts. And there's a lot of them. On the left is a detail of just what is happening to those posts because of the moisture that's been in that space for years and years. This is not a quick patch, this is a project. And it really needs to be planned and incorporated into that North Stair project because it's similar contractors, similar engineering exercises. And whatever we do out there might drive some decisions in here. And then going one floor down into the main electrical vault, that water that I showed you up there has made its way over the years. This is the main electrical vault where we have two 480 amp services coming into the building. And we have water. That's not good. So when I first came to work here, I walked in there and noticed it was damp, and I thought that's kind of weird. And it's taken a while to realize we have a systemic problem on this whole end of the building. It needs a comprehensive approach that really addresses it from source right down through the whole building to the basement. And it's a big project. Right now, we just kicked off an engineering study to start to figure out what to do with those stairs, how to replace them, how to deal with the water, how to deal with the stormwater, how to deal with the utilities that come in under it. And it's gonna change the face of that side of the building, what we do. So again, it's not just a straight replacement. It's not just a fix it. It needs to take into account the long-term use of the building, how traffic is gonna flow, foot traffic around that end of the building, the perspective of the entrance of the tech, all of that ups into what from the basement is just a straightforward structural electrical problem. From there, where do we go next? Over to the middle school. This one came up, actually, Tom, I thought about the conversation we had very early on. Where we talked about how the windows, I laughed because when I started here, people referred to the new windows in the middle school. And I think they were put in the late 70s, early 80s. They're not new windows. And they weren't, to be blunt, they weren't fantastic windows then. They're probably the best option we could do at the time, and it was the best effort. But they don't really keep the water out. And it's a problem with the building envelope that from the outside looking in, you say, yeah, it looks a little time worn. But these pictures here are the ceiling of the music room in the basement of the middle school. This section over here, I tore out the ceiling a year ago because I was more concerned about mold than I was about aesthetics. So we just pulled it out because we can't keep it dry. This is a detail of what that ceiling looks like up close. It's rusted. It's just gone. So, when we've met to talk about facilities, we've talked about enhancements and improvements to our extracurricular programs. I'm all for it. And, I have a kid in this school. At the same time, from my desk being in charge of maintenance here, I want to keep the building dry while I make those enhancements. So here's a situation where we have to bring somebody in to take a long overdue comprehensive look at that building envelope and determine what we're gonna do with it. And then we get to figure out how we put the music room back together. And that's kind of where this aspirational thinking about program development meets the very real requirement for facilities, maintenance and upgrades. So I am of two minds on this bond question. One is, I just need the resources to fix this stuff and make it right. But I feel compelled to argue hard for the resources to do that in an informed, comprehensive manner. So these are just some kind of concrete examples, but very real examples of how these little problems, you know, in 1979, I'm told by somebody who was here, those windows leaked a little bit when they went in and they thought it's not that big a deal. Here we are all these years later, and I pulled the ceiling out of the music room. To take it one step further, this is currently a code violation because smoke detectors aren't effective if there's no hard ceiling in the room. And the room doesn't have sprinklers. So it's just not right. And I'm not gonna just go in and caulk around the windows and put new ceiling tiles in and replace them when they're stained, knowing we're kicking a can down the road. And I don't want to spend the money on any of that if we really consider what that program needs for facilities and housing to develop and grow. I think that's mine.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, so Jonathan has discussed the significant infrastructure considerations, and they're clearly a pivotal aspect of this, effort. There are real challenges around maintaining and upgrading 450,000 square feet of building, and then establishing the operating fund to keep up with the ever evolving need. But I'm gonna switch gears to aspirations. These bottom two pieces of this bond, the master facility plan and the district growth and catchment study, are an investment in what we want for our district and not just things that we have to do for regulatory needs. Next slide. So 1884, we built the high school. They consolidated some private schools, some public schools, and some other things in the area. And then 9 years later, they had to put an addition on it. Next slide. Then they built the White River School. So the high school moved over. Next slide, and that was in 1907. And then in 52, they built the Memorial School, which was also then the high school. So every time we got bigger, we changed the usage of our buildings. Next slide. In 1960, the interstate change was coming, 89 and 91. They thought really hard about what the right decision was for the district. And they created Hartford High School. It opened in 1963 and enrollment doubled in 4 years in this school. Next slide. So we invested in 2 new elementary schools in 1990, and then again in 2019 when we revitalized the Wilder School. So we all think about these buildings and their modern usage, but we've adapted time and time again. So as the community has grown and changed and our needs have grown and changed, we evaluated what we actually needed and made clear choices for how we wanted to house our students. Next. So the growth and catchment study, these are kind of my big bullet points. Obviously our schools are in the 21st century and we have a lot of 20th century buildings. The way we educate children has changed significantly. And we're hoping to achieve with this study, we want to get a firm who can bring in expertise and objectivity. We want to optimize our catchment areas, which is, which students go to which schools. We would like to use their expertise to project our student enrollment. And then use that to plan for necessary infrastructure. The goal is to evaluate all of the existing facilities, recommend upgrades or expansions to accommodate specific needs. And we also really want community engagement. We're going to want input from all the stakeholders, parents, students, citizens, businesses, because we really want to foster a sense of ownership for the district. And we share these resources. Next. And then with all of that information that we're gathering, that's where we'll take the master facility plan. We want to look at cost efficiency, improved overall quality, and then strategic alignment with educational programming. We're trying to look ahead and anticipate needs and create facilities that support a high quality education. We dream of creating a campus conducive to experiential learning, modernizing our science labs, outfitting our libraries for modern uses as hubs of activity, as well as research and books. Next slide. So one of the big aspirational goals that we have is to really evaluate Highland Avenue. And take advantage of the kind of the gateway to our school campus. How do we reallocate that space? And this is one of the places that we'd really like to look at, like, is this where we put a performing arts center? Is this where we put extra, space for our superintendent's offices or our special education offices? So this kind of forward thinking where we want to engage our community. I mean, the performing arts are incredibly, well attended and well, appreciated in our community. And then next. And then the same with athletics. There's a huge source of pride for our town. Upgrades for the facilities will allow our programs to grow and flourish. There's envisioning for renovating the gym. Maybe we'll get that track that everybody wanted. But there's also a lot of potential for expanding our outreach. So Hartford has been asked before to host regional events, and we are, unfortunately, some of the things we can't host because we don't have the right facilities. These kinds of regional events, if you've ever been at the UVAC on a swim team weekend, like there's parking all the way down by Bob's and the hotels and all the way down by the post office. So it's bringing hundreds of people into the area. In both arts and athletics, we have the potential to host regional events, bringing prestige, income, and opportunities for our students. Next. So it costs money, a lot of money. But we're really trying to invest in our kids, not just our buildings. We want to build on past success. We really have to embrace some change and create a legacy of educational excellence. So here's the ask. Next slide. The bond is $21 million. The term is 20 years. The financing cost is $9,165,975 for a total cost of $30,165,975. And I know that Jake was working on a number. Tom, did we?
He did do it, unfortunately, plugged it into the
budget.
It's in yours.
Yeah.
So Peter will catch us up. So there is a I know we were asked, and there is an average impact on per taxpayer.
Yeah, for next Saturday, I'll cut and paste it, put it in bold.
Perfect. So yeah, I think I've given my pitch. I really encourage everyone to support this bond. Some of the things that Jonathan mentioned have to be done, whether the bond passes or not. So we're gonna have to find the money from somewhere. So I really do see this as a pivotal moment and an opportunity for the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Are we gonna take questions now, or do you want to
You
go?
wanna take questions
Sure.
now and then, just flow better, I guess, you do that, and then go to the presentation to do the same. And Mike, you can help me with anyone in cyber world. They have questions, but if anyone here has questions, would you like them to come up so you can hear it better, or how do you want?
It's really for the TV. I'll probably be able to hear, but I'm not sure what he wants them to do.
Yeah, Mike, do you think these will pick up okay if someone speaks from back there?
Generally, like maybe from that post forward at a regular volume would be okay.
Yeah,
And
so,
come a little forward.
sorry, you're gonna have to come over to
Yes,
the
yeah.
post. We're still working on a formal, professional sound system in here, but.
We do have one hand.
That's right. My name is Erica Fallon. I'm from Queechee. I have two questions, and Sarah, we can just go out there. If we receive state grant money, or there's money that comes in from the state and they find money for, can we apply that to the bond as like pay it down sooner? Like if there's a building facility allotment that comes out from the state, is that something we
Yeah.
can?
I don't actually know the answer.
So theoretically, yes,
Okay.
but it's going to very much depend on how the state, if it gets to that point, sets up the program. I could easily foresee them saying, any existing program that gets funding from this and systems. I could also, quite frankly, see them saying, no, we're only gonna fund new work, because you're already paying for it, you're already doing it, we don't need that. I don't know which way it's gonna come out. Coaches mentioned that there's consideration for the first time really of doing something.
I've seen that in,
Yeah, and I haven't gotten details from him, and unfortunately, he's not with us. So I can't answer. I don't know how they built the program, but theoretically, yes.
okay, so I guess the question was, yeah, if it was like a bond requirement, like we can't
If,
pay
if
them.
they allow us, to do it,
And it fits
Yeah.
our programming.
Yeah.
And then the second question, for an example, like the middle school, I know we need to ideally study it, but what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Like it has to be done. So do we just patch it and put sprinklers up, or do we have to study it? How long would that take? I mean, if we had the money tomorrow.
So in general, an RFP process can run 2 months, and then if you pick a firm, you can get off the ground pretty quickly. It will depend on, the process. It wouldn't start till July. And I think that they'll overlap a lot. I think there'll be a lot of conversations that actually affect both groups of people at the same time. So, I'm gonna speak specifically to my work because I'm doing this in my real life. Looking at a master facility plan and making decisions about what must be done in a way that you don't cause rework for stuff that you want to be done. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes you put siding on a building that you might tear down later because it's the least expensive way to get it to like a decent place to last 5 years. So the decision to keep something running for 5 years would have a different implication than the decision to keep something running for 50. Does that make sense?
I do understand that, but I guess what I'm getting to is if we pass this, will we have an operational safe band room in the fall?
I can,
Yeah.
Like, do you know, I mean,
Yeah,
there's a
I
couple, I see what you're saying, if I may, so there's a couple things on that. When I look at life safety, fire safety, there's code compliance, which is what we must do
yes,
to keep people safe by the letter of the law. And that's always interpreted by the local and state official that we do that today. We have all kinds of situations that don't meet current code, but we're okay because they're in good repair, they're inspected, they're well maintained. When I talk about that room not being sprinkled, it's not that the fire marshal came in and said, get everybody out. The fire marshal came in and said, if you want to use this in a different way, enhance it, improve it, that's going to trigger these upgrades, which is how it works. When we built this restroom space, this room, the next room and the shop, one of the things that the fire marshal tied to this as a condition of occupancy was that we would get a plan in place for a new fire alarm system for the whole complex. That seems like a lot to tie to this, but it's how it works. You do significant renovation, it triggers the next step. So when I talk about integrating these projects into a master plan, I don't mean that we're gonna allow a situation to exist that is hazardous in it. I'm not gonna do that. If, not only because my daughter's there, but also yours is.
yeah, thank you.
But, we're not gonna allow that to happen, but we need to understand the big picture because that might not be the music room in 5 years.
Yes, and I absolutely, I just like it's the intersect of studying so much that it takes so long that we don't get stuff fixed. Yeah, that's what I'm,
So how that
Wanted
plays out in practice
yeah,
is for this building, we need a new fire alarm system for the whole building. When we did this renovation, the fire alarm system in this little section is completely up to current code. It couldn't be better. Guaranteed. The fire marshal said, and the state electrical inspector said, when you are done, they sat with me and stared at me and said, you will give us by July 1, an engineered plan for replacement of your system. We don't expect you to be able to do it all by July 1. It's too much. It's just the plan. So we've hired the engineering firms to do those plans, and that's underway right now. In terms of execution, for a bunch of reasons, both because of the complexity of the work, the cost of the work, there's a whole bunch of stuff. You're not going to shut this building down for the whole summer and try to get it all done. We're going to do it in sections. So year one, we'll do the panel up here in the tech, and we'll do a enunciator so it talks to the department the right way. And we'll engineer the fix in a way that we can march through the building in sections and zones. Now, again, not to get too deep in the weeds, but when we get to like theater, right, the theater's not sprinkled. So are we gonna put the sprinkler in that theater as it stands, or that gym as it stands? Or are we going to build a system with the capacity for that gym or that theater as it will be? That's what Sarah says about not taking steps back. I'm gonna keep moving forward because that's my job. How much I move forward and how well informed I am depends on this.
Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Thanks, Eric. Are there any more questions?
There's a hand up.
Just a clarifying question, Sarah, you were talking about the district's growth and catchment studies, you were mentioning the stakeholders that would be involved in the conversation. I don't know if I didn't hear it or anything, but is there a plan to include district staff in that conversation?
And I will add that word to my thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that there's any scenario where we would not talk to each building separately, you know, like in groups, and then we would have large conversations. I mean, I'm envisioning there'll be 8 or 9 community meetings where we have to talk about this, you know, these big decisions. So of course, yes, and I'll make sure I mention that next time.
Mike, you said you had a hand up?
Yeah, there's a. I hate it.
Okay, please.
Hello, Heidi.
Hey Heidi.
Hi, good evening. Heidi Due to White River Junction, Vermont. This doesn't really have to do as much with the proposal as the individuals at home are unable to see the presentation screen, and it would be much appreciated if someone could let us see what's going on.
Okay, I can join the Zoom meeting and show that. In the meantime, you can access that on the HSDVT website. It's in the school board folder for tonight,
Okay.
but I will get on Zoom so I can project this. Mike, can you make me a panelist? Anyone else?
Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi.
My name is Colin Butler. Good evening, everybody. I've listened first to what Jonathan said, and it gives me a lot of encouragement that we're not going to get things backwards. But it really bothers me. And let me stop and say, I don't want to scold any of you current school board members, because the fault that I see lies with people who've been on the school board over 30 or 40 years probably, who did not provide for the adequate maintenance of our facilities. And we're now faced with some of the things that Jonathan put slides up for that probably shouldn't have to be addressed these days, but does, because nobody paid any attention. There wasn't the money that was spent on facilities upkeep when there were other pressing needs. I understand that. My concern right now, Jonathan did a pretty good job of convincing me I shouldn't be concerned perhaps, but my concern right now is that I am not comfortable with borrowing $20 million, spending $30 million taxpayer money to pay that money back, going ahead and doing a lot of work, which is purely and simply fixing problems which exist right now, only to do a study. There's $500,000 of studying money at the very top of that list of what the bond is going to pay for. Only to do a study, which may tell us that we've got completely different needs going forward than what we're addressing today in our current set of buildings. And it really bothers me to think that we're going to repair, rehabilitate space that you folks may realize when the studying is done, we don't even need, or we need it configured in such a way that we're going to go in and rip out stuff that we've just rehabilitated. It seems to me that before we spend $20 million on facilities, that we ought to spend that study money and determine just what it is we're trying to accomplish in public education in this district, and be sure that what we're that what we're planning is going to be accommodated for in the set of buildings that we have, and identify what needs to change in these buildings before we spend the money to make changes to the buildings, update the buildings, only to realize after the fact that we don't need the gym that's there now. We need a new gym. But it doesn't fit the space where it is right now, and it's gotta be moved 100 yards somewhere. And so the portal that gets you from the school to the gym is in the wrong place. I think you implied that might be a possibility. It's just gonna be a real disappointment to see money wasted that could be better spent on providing adequate facilities for our kids going forward if we don't do the studying first. So my inclination is to say no on the bond issue in order to provide adequate time to study before we spend money, provide money to be spent. And I realize there are things that need to be done immediately, and I'm not sure I have the answer for that, but other than put it off for 40 years, maybe 41 or 42 is not a problem. Thanks.
I 100% agree with you, Colin, and that is, actually how we've built this bond. So some of the work needs to get started now. We've already got engineering studies, we've already got pieces that are life safety related. But the plan is to use that master facility study and that growth study to decide how we want to use the facilities before we tear up the ground, for the very reason you just spoke of, is that I don't want to do rework. I don't want to pave a parking lot and then rip it up like the town of Lebanon and put a sewer line down and then repave the road, you know, like we're trying to avoid that. And that's why these things are meshed the way they are. Does that help you?
Well, you attempted, but it really doesn't, because I think the planning needs to be done far enough in advance that we don't run the risk of having to undo work that we've just accomplished. Why borrow the money and spend that money and spend the district's resources to do something that, when we have the study accomplished, we find out isn't required anymore?
Well, first, I'm glad I almost convinced you. I'll keep trying. So your point is spot on, frankly. And the way I come at it from my desk, which is facilities director, is there are some things that regardless of what aspirations we have, we must do. Like when I come in every day, we make a series of choices. We start with, is it safe? Is it comfortable? Is it conducive to whatever learning environment we need in whatever area that day? There's literally hundreds of these little microclimates of learning going on every day. So it starts with just what are the basics. Those basics are going to be true no matter what. We dealt with a situation at the Wilder schools very currently where we had a problem with the heating system. We make it work to keep everything comfortable. The kids in that school are oblivious to it while we come up with the right solution. On a larger scale, what that means is there are things that we must do no matter what. I'm pretty sure that a master plan, and I say this with some confidence, is not going to come in and say, tear down everything on this footprint. That's not going to happen. That's not rational. What they may say is look at repurposing buildings and spaces to fit programmatic and extracurricular development. What I can do from my perspective is when I look at infrastructure for this building, when we look at what we need to do to support a new sprinkler system, what we look at what we do, I can put in the infrastructure and I can be doing that work now, because that will be the work regardless. The trick here and the challenge is to do it concurrent with this really deep dive, inclusive planning process, so that when we do take the next step, we've already built the platform, the foundation to build on. I can tell you that this concrete stairway was probably a bad design when it was built. That's my opinion. I can tell you that it's trying to find its way to Norwich. I can tell you that it's failing and leaking. We have all these problems. I can throw darts at how to fix it, but I need an engineer to really dial that in. So we're gonna keep working on all this stuff. It's have to like slow down in a hurry. We gotta slow down enough to make the right decisions, but some of this stuff, we just can't let it ride. It's really not an option to go to year 42 or 43 with the fire alarm system that's building without a plan. So it kind of has to happen concurrently. And the challenge is making sure that the steps we take every day are in the right direction for the big steps we take on an annual and 5-year and 30-year basis. That's the challenge. So I think you're right, and that's just kind of how we approach it.
One of the things I want to address, having been here for 13 years now, is the deferred maintenance and that whole issue. Since the day I started, there was a larger need than there was funds in the budget to support. Every year we have about, when I first started, $350,000 to maintain over 450,000 square feet. It's always been grossly insufficient. We, I've year after year proposed to the board certain bonds and increasing the facilities maintenance line in the budget. And they've been really, really good about that. We've passed over $30 million worth of bonds in this district. I think in the time that I've been here, we've done a lot. But it's still not enough. And we never have enough in the budget. We've tried to increase it the last few years to $1 million, $1.3 million every year. It's sort of the first thing to get cut or reduced. So we need to do better with that. That's absolutely true. We have a lot of buildings that Sarah went through the age and the condition. Frankly, they look better than most of my colleagues' buildings. As I go around the state, we're in good shape. A lot of districts, in fact, the neighboring district has a building the same vintage, if you will, as our high school. They want to tear it down. It's in such poor condition. It needs to be torn down and rebuilt to the tune of $99 million. We're not in that situation. Our building's still good. It looks good. There's a lot of strong point, has big needs. I think most schools in the country, unless they're privately funded or independent schools, they have big infrastructure needs. It's public education, unfortunately. I'm not saying it's okay, but we need to do better.
Any other comments or questions? Go ahead.
I'd like to make just one more comment. You're proposing to borrow $20 million and pay back 30. So you'll get to spend 2/3 of the money that our taxpayers pay you on our buildings. The other third will be paid to institutional investors or whoever buys bonds these days. If you had put, again, I'm not criticizing current board members, if you had put adequate funding for maintenance in the budgets year after year after year, 100% of the money that was put in the budget would have been spent on our buildings. Instead, 2/3 of the money that you're going to charge us as taxpayers will be spent on the buildings. 1/3 is going to go to China or somewhere. Is that good business? Thanks.
Board? Doug, do you have anything? Do you have any questions?
There's no one else online. With the
Anyone else?
hand raised.
Well, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we'll go back down to fiscal year 25 revised budget presentation and discussion. And I believe, Peter, you're gonna lead that.
I am. First up, the presentation I'm giving is not the one that's in your packets, and it's not the one that's out there because I have been editing and reshuffling and so forth. We've been putting this together as fast as we could, and this has been an interesting roller coaster ride. So with that, let's go to slide 2, which is where I pulled the Band-Aid off. One second. So, bad news. This is gonna be very, very uncomfortable. The average cost of a home in Vermont is approximately $373,000, according to the figures we could find. And based on that, the tax increase is gonna be $1,232 with a total tax bill of $7,880. For those of us who are subject to income insensitivity, and if you had a $50,000, again, with a $373,000 home, the tax increase will be $578 for a total tax of $5,072, which is a really big number in both cases for any individual looking at paying that. So go to the next slide. Big as that number is, that's based on a budget that is an 8% increase in total terms over last year's budget, which is significantly lower than the state average of 12%. And if you look at it on a per pupil basis, we actually have gone down in spending because our number of pupils is going up. Next slide, please. So how do we spend the 39,211 371 that we're hoping to get you guys to approve? Well, approximately 25% on the district large functions, 25% on the high school, and then, 10%, or approximately an eighth on each of the other schools in the district. So go to the next slide. But that actually, that big number, that $39,000, $39 million number, has a lot of cuts built into it. This is not going to be fun for anybody. High school is getting close to just over $500,000. Athletics are going to be cut by about 90,000, et cetera, et cetera. Go down the list. Nobody is going to be spared from the cuts that we are going to have to make to programs. And the fact that programs turn into people and positions, nobody's going to be spared from the pain of that. We are fortunate in that we have a lot of budgeted positions that we have not been able to fill because of the current lack of available people to fill those positions. And so we will target those positions first. And wherever there's an individual who's in a program that's going to be cut, we're going to see if we can offer them a position that is in one of those spaces that we want to keep, that's still empty. But no matter how you do it, we're going to end up having to let people go. Right now, it's around 4 or 5 people, we believe. Yeah. So, not easy. Again. So, next slide. Additional, we're going to be cutting the bowling, the alpine skiing, snowboarding, bass fishing, and we're going to cut back on tennis, football, boys soccer, and golf. There's a lot of pain going on here. This is not the super extravagant gold-plated budget that some people might like to think it is. Next to, so why are we in this position? Well, this is the US inflation over the last couple of years. And you'll see that it got up to about 7%. Some figures have been higher, but all those costs are now contained in the system. Even though when the slope goes down, that's still showing an increase in prices year over year of about 3%. Next slide, please. Same basic graph is for the northeastern region in which we live. This is about as easy or as granular as we could get easily. So when we are grabbing graphs, we want to show the same kinds of numbers, slightly higher here, going up to just shy of 8%, and running somewhere around 2.5–3%. and so forth. Next slide. So that's why we have it. But, you know, funny thing is, that inflation number and all that isn't really the reason that we're facing such an incredibly high cost to the taxpayer this year. It actually has to do this flow sheet. This flow sheet sets out exactly how the local, and they're not really local is the point, education tax is raised in a community. And it goes through this whole process, and this is all done by the state. If you go to the next slide, please. This is the takeaway of that previous slide. Total education in a town is not the determinant of tax rates. The amount spent per pupil is. So you'd think, given the fact that I just told you that the per pupil education spending is what drives the tax rates, and that dropped in this budget significantly, we'd be having a lower taxes. Well, not true. Go to the next slide, please. This is the hidden zinger. The equalized tax rates, when they run through all the process, spending per pupil, everything else, the yield, how much money they can raise for a given tax rate, et cetera, they take the tax rate that they got and they divide it by the common level of appraisal, which is the value of the grand list as it is on the tax rolls versus the value of that real estate in the current market. And there's the relationship between the value of the grand list and the actual value of the real estate in the town, but it can be a rather tenuous relationship at times, depending on how recently somebody did a reevaluation of the property values and based on the economic circumstances of the town. Well, we just pointed out that there's been huge amount of inflation in the economy. That huge amount of inflation includes the cost of housing. So there's been a big reason that the relationship between the tax rate and the common level of appraisal and the actual value of the houses is a little bit off. Also, we had a little thing called COVID. And as a result of that, a lot of people came to Vermont, and a lot of people, because they were trying to get away from crowded cities that were potentially dangerous, and they wanted to go someplace safe. A lot of the people who moved decided they liked it. And that's a marvelous compliment. They would want to stay here, but it's been awful hard on the availability of property if you wanted to buy a new house. And when there's a shortage of houses available and a lot of people who want them, basic economics says the price is going to go up because there is more demand than there is supply. So we're looking at this CLA and the fact that this is the way it's used. Go to the next slide. So why does this matter? Well, the flow sheet basically says you got more equalized students, your tax rate goes down. Well, we did that and it didn't help. And the yield lowers the tax rate. The higher it is, the lower the taxes are because you get more money for each dollar you're trying to tax somebody. And we've actually gotten some benefit, but it still hasn't helped. And why hasn't helped? Because the common level of appraisal increases, lowers the tax rate, decreases, increases the tax rate. Next slide, please. How does this work? Well, this is very, very simple math. So, in a perfect world, the one here would reflect the common level of appraisal. If the common level of appraisal was 1, the value of our grand list and the value of the property itself would be exactly the same. As you can see, if you take a number, in this case 2, and divide it by 1, you get 2. There's no change. But if you're really lucky and your common level of appraisal is 2 because the houses on the brand list are worth a whole lot more, or actually a whole lot less than, the property. You got a savings, it just went down. See what happens in our case. If the appraisal, common list of appraisal is 0.5, which is only half less than 1, it goes up to 4. And this is where we got caught, the way that ratio works. So next slide, please. So this is Hartford's CLA for various years, and you can see that for a long time, it was more or less stable. It was wandering around more or less close to 100. But if you look at the FY25 number, you see it fell off a cliff. It got sort of flat, and it's down about 65%, 66 or so percent, which if you remember the immediately previous slide shows that the tax rate's going to go up a lot. So next slide, please. Based on that, we're getting a tax rate of 2.0822 with the discount that the state was kind enough to allow us to have, which is an 18.5% increase in our taxes, which is coincidentally exactly what we as a school board asked the school administrators to come back with. So 18.5% sounds enormous, but when you track it back to our budgets and the cuts that we have had to do to make it, it's not enormous because of spending. It's not enormous because we don't have enough students. It's not enormous because we can't raise the money. It's enormous because the common level of appraisal is so disconnected with reality that we're having to pay an enormous tax. So next slide, please. This is the discount that we were just discussing. The state and its generosity, and I do think it's generosity, I'm not being slide there, is actually trying to help bring it down a bit. So next slide. One consequence of this, though, is even though our tax rates are going up over last year, the amount of money we're going to get from the state after all this process has gone through is significantly less than we got from the state last year. We're going to be asked to not only pay more, but get less as a result. It's sort of a double whammy. Next slide, please. You can skip this one, it's not a whole lot of help. So one of the questions that has been asked repeatedly is about the bond and its impact on the budgets going forward. We've been trying to say it's an awful lot of it depends, but if you make some assumptions, you can make a guess. And this assumptions are that we get reappraised soon, that the common level appraisal stays close to 100 or 1, that the yields are stable, they stay around where they are. The long-term weighted average of pupils stays about the same. We don't lose a whole lot of pupils, and expenditures increase by 3% each year. This table, by the way, is going to be available. It's not already on the school board website. But the effect on the property rate of the bond is for 25, no effect at all, because we've got money that we're going to use to spend down the cost of the bond. And then it has a effect of actually decreasing our expenditures for a couple of years. And then we start paying out as it gets out. But the purpose of the bond is to save money. The reason we have the bond, and rather than trying to do this in our budgets, is if we can pay off the cost of doing this work over 20 years, admittedly with the cost of financing, we do not get a major hit right now at the time when we can least afford it. So, next slide, please. Okay, that's basically the budget and how it worked out and why it's so large and why it's going to be painful for the taxpayers and painful for the school district and painful for the school staff. Because we're caught in a squeeze in which we have very little control, but we have done everything we can possible, deferring costs into the bond, cutting costs, cutting programs, attracting a lot of really smart, wonderful students from local communities so that we can have a higher pupil count. All of those things went into the numbers you just saw.
Thank you, Peter. Who has questions? Welcome on that back row. I see you. Put those hands up. Take that first step. It's always the first.
Just, kind of a general question. I understand the money's gotta be cut from somewhere. I'm not disputing that fact. I'm not, all this talk about the money and the ratios and everything is not really why I'm here or what my questions are around. My questions are around what is being cut. You've got, slide number 3 here that talks about what is being cut from athletics, which is fine. As a parent, I got that letter from Jeff. As a parent, I got Nelson's letter saying what's being cut at the high school. As an employee, I got the letter from Doug, what's being cut at White River School. But you're very specific here, what's being cut from athletics, and then here you're just like, this is what's being cut from the school. This is what's being cut from the school. What, as a taxpayer, I want to know what I'm voting for. What cuts am I voting for or not voting for? Because that's going to make a difference in my vote. If you're telling me you're cutting, at my school, 147,000, I know what those cuts are for. They're not going to be saving money in the long run. What are these other cuts? If you're cutting things that aren't going to matter, then I'm not going to vote for the budget. If you're cutting things that really can be cut without making a huge impact on the students, then you would stand a better chance of getting a yes vote from me. Just be more transparent on that.
So first of all, yes, we need more detail. I haven't been able to gather it yet.
Yeah, I do have it. I've been gathering it.
Yeah.
We wanted to make sure we told anyone impacted before we started publishing.
So,
I think that the voters.
we will, but the fact is, there is no way to do this in a way that does not hurt.
I'm not
There
saying
is-
that. I'm
There
just
is
saying,
no way to do
tell
this.
us what you're cutting.
Yeah, so we are going to have that made available. But there is no way to say, we went and cut waste and fraud. That isn't, there's never been a huge amount of waste in the school district. There's never been a huge amount of fraud in the school district. We're gonna cut people. That is never going to be good because those people are the people that take care of our students, that get them right with the world when they're unhappy with things and they need some psychological help. All of that stuff is gonna get cut.
Yeah.
No, and I'm talking to the public about, none of this is nice.
Yeah, school budget is generally made up of 75% staff. That's what it is, personnel. And as you know, we have some towards facilities and operation, electricity and heat, all that stuff, but majority is people and costs of employing 430 plus. Oh,
Matt,
Hi, Nicole Bailu, I'm the HEA president. So your slideshow, you have a slide with a statistic on there that gives the impact on the taxes for someone making $50,000 or less with a 300 and something thousand dollars.
$373,000.
What is the impact on someone making more than $50,000 with a $373,000?
So there are included in the packet, which is going to be there, the rules on how the income adjustment, the income sensitivity, as they call it, phases out. So you get less and less support from the state as you get more and more education. I mean, more and more, income.
So is there a figure you're sharing with the public?
Uh, so I have not run the table for every $5,000 increment on salary. I just literally got this, yesterday from our business manager.
We certainly could put.
So I shared
a
a-
couple more scenarios.
I shared an example from Berry City and Berry Town that had a $100,000 home, which at 200,000, 300,000, and it didn't have every $5,000 increment, but it did have 50,000, 100,000
So-
salary, 150,000.
So what I can say is, if you go back to the, that very first slide. Okay, slide two. Okay. So the reason we chose the numbers that we chose. $50,000 is when the income sensitivity starts kicking off. So the more you earn above that, the less you get. We did the $373,000 home because that's the average price of a home in Vermont. It may be that if you have less income, you have a less valuable house. It may be that there's no relationship at all between your income and your house. But we do that. But as you go up, and I think it stops at about 130 something. Yeah. So as the close, you know, closer you get to that top number, less and less until you basically end up paying the 7,700. So you're gonna pay, in this example, more and more as your income is higher, starting at $5,000, working your way up to just under 8,000.
Yeah, so the way you explained it right there, that makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah.
When you explained it the first time, I don't think it was clear that, you know, the maximum would be 7880.
For a house of that day.
That house,
Yes.
yeah. So I would just ask that when you're presenting this to the town, just like, they're not, I don't think the average town person is
Right.
gonna be able to do that math. Like, give them a couple of figures where they can put their house in between and their income in between and say, here's where I am, can I afford this?
Right.
So.
Appreciate the feedback.
Thanks, Nicole. Anyone else?
Trying to get out.
Yes, so they can hear you.
That number that you had of the average home price in Vermont, we're assuming that if there's 60% of the houses that haven't been reassessed in Hartford, that a lot of people's home prices could go up this summer or be reassessed at a higher.
Probably, yes.
So you might not actually know what they were gonna assess your house. That's what I'm,
That is
if
an
we're
issue.
hoping
Yeah, it's an issue for future years.
for
Right now,
future years.
yes, because they're not gonna be able to reassess the value of the grand list before we have to vote on this.
Okay,
And
so
the
right
taxes go
now,
up.
as a taxpayer, what my house is assessed at.
Yeah.
Is that 18%.
That's the average for the entire state, and that includes tens of thousands of square foot cottages on the lake, as well as the person who's making do with a mobile home somewhere.
I'm just, yeah, so my question was basically, they don't have to anticipate their house value, like
Yeah.
trying to calculate. that.
Right, and we have a tax calculator, by the way, that people can access. It's referenced in this document.
Yeah, that would be helpful if it was like.
Yeah.
the
I think
cost.
it's in the appendix.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where you go to the state and then it's a link there. It's in the appendix stuff. And if like the rest of this is going to be available.
And since I'm up here, and I don't know if this is appropriate time to ask for it, but, Plan B. At what tax rate do we tolerate? And what's the tax rate that seems to be passing in different districts? Like I know Colchester, they had a very similar budget to us size wise. Theirs did pass by 380 votes, and I'm wondering like, what was their increase? What does it?
I'm afraid I haven't we got the numbers, we used them to find out what the average
Yeah,
budget increase was, but I don't have in my head.
no, that's okay. That's
I
why I
apologize.
just put it out there.
Yeah.
What's that toleration number?
Yeah, and I suspect strongly it's gonna be different for each community. So We can, at the end of this exercise, figure out what the average increase was for the state of Vermont and have some idea. But that may or may not reflect anything what the local community will be able to tolerate or afford. This is the ultimate example of being between a rock and a hard place. We don't have any good choices.
Sarah,
I'm gonna ask the obnoxious question that everyone wants to ask. What happens if it fails?
We keep on voting.
That was
But that's what, yeah, I mean, that's just where I just wanted to ask, like, we keep voting, but that means we're voting on lower and lower numbers, more and more cuts. Like, this is the best case scenario, right?
So this is the least harm we thought we could propose to the community that valued decimating the school district against decimating the taxpayers.
Yep. Thanks. Anyone else?
There's a hand up.
Hand up?
Someone.
We'll get back to you just a minute, Colin.
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Patrick.
All right. So Patrick Gordon, I live in Wilder, 401 Colonial Drive with my family. We intentionally settled in the Hartford community because of the quality of the school systems. And I have a 5-year-old who attends pre-K and will be attending kindergarten next year, and we're very excited about it. Of course, all these discussions make us very concerned. I myself am a principal. Lucky, I consider myself lucky enough at this moment to be serving in New Hampshire. I can't envision what the mess is like dealing with on the ground. I give a lot of credit to Tom and his administration team, to you, the board, who have had to weigh a lot of difficult questions around strategic plan and what do we do, how do we maintain it. So I don't admire you for what where we're at. And I just want to make a general statement of I'm feeling as a taxpayer really abandoned by our legislature. And I hope that everyone that is here tonight communicates that with our legislature. Because by no means, you folks in the room who have done a great job making the best out of the worst possible situation, you don't deserve it. You work hard and you deliver for our students every day. So I hope that we can rally, get behind you, and communicate to our legislature that we really do need to look at a top-down systemic approach change to funding education in the state. And I hope that you all get the opportunity and the stage to say that to the people that need to be said to. One of my concerns that I really wanted to talk about tonight was 29 out of the 95 districts failed with percent increases from in the teens all the way to the upper 30s on town meeting day. I'm really concerned that we are set up on a path to potentially not be able to pass, as was just referenced. And what I really think needs to be put out there, and I hope that you can put out there with the help of Tom and his administration team, is those items that were being considered by his team that didn't make the chopping block this time. Because as referenced, we'll go to the next number. We'll go to 16. We'll go to 17. We'll go to wherever. But those are positions that are currently possibly occupied by people doing great work with children. And I think that there is value in communicating this to the community, because there are people out there who need to know that their no vote represents my child's education and of many children's education in our town, and how it's going to impact and how it's going to affect. So I'm wondering if that's been considered to be communicated next Saturday. Regardless, folks, had you come to me and said 36% is what we felt like we need, I would have voted yes, because public education is for everyone. And I believe in it wholeheartedly. I would have figured it out. I would have strapped down, but I know everyone can't. And their vote represents something to them too. And they're going to ask the hard questions too. I really would like to see that information be presented, because I think that would help some people who might be sitting here wondering, well, what could the next number be? And could I then make ends meet? Thank you for your time. Thank you for your dedication to our students. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate them. We will continue to work on this presentation. normally, and this is not an excuse, it's just an explanation. Normally, we have about 3 months to pull together a budget. This time we did it in about 2 weeks, 2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
2 weeks,
That's
so,
why we're warned it, and people have been concerned about the date of the vote, it's on
Yeah.
tax day, and it's the first day back.
and that's the longest the state gave us.
It was absolutely, deadlocked when we could hold that vote, when we could warn the new budget. We had 2 weeks to work on it.
Yeah.
So I think Patrick brings up a lot of good concerns. I would like to ask the board that we, have an executive session tonight just to consider some of those questions, because there is no room after this, and I don't want to paint a bleak picture, but after this budget proposal, all the cuts will be people. There is no vacant position left. So we did the best we could to make it as, painless as possible. It's gonna hurt because they're all positions we needed. We didn't just have things that were fluff, things that we really wanted and needed, but after this, they're all positions with people and we did cut a lot of equipment and supplies and things that, won't hurt. We'll do without it for a year. We have no tech replacement budget next year at all. And we've always been pretty good about replacing computers and having enough devices for staff and kids, but for 1 year, we'll forgo anything that's new. So. It's hard.
Colin had another.
And I'd like to just remind everybody, when you started the budget process, you agreed with the fact the state negotiated health insurance and stuff, et cetera, for all school employees, and informed you that you had a 16% increase to your budget. And there's no discussion, there's nothing, sorry, it's there, and you gotta deal with it. So when people look at the negative numbers and where we're headed, talk to your legislators and your senators. They're the ones that produce this problem.
And as difficult as a 16% increase in healthcare costs for our employees is, that wasn't even what caused this problem. That is like complaining about a stubbed toe after you just ran into a bridge abutment. I mean, the real issue is the way this particular formula worked quite well in an environment with absolutely no inflation. We just ran off the end of the no inflation road. We're now stuck in the mud. It ain't real fun.
Colin, you had another question
Yes, sir.
or a comment, either one or both?
Probably both.
Okay.
I forgave you before for all the poor performance school boards going back 40 years. This time I am going to criticize. What you folks are working on is not getting out to the public in any logical, precise, scientific manner. I might read something that Sarah posts in some group on Facebook. I may see your superintendent writing a letter, which is posted on the listserv. I can go on your website, which is absolutely the worst place to go and try to find information about this budget. But I've got no confidence that what I'm seeing is the totality of what I need to be looking at in order to consider how I'm going to react to it and vote. You really got to sit back, look at your website, take everything off the website that you've got there now and put it back piece by piece by piece in some logical form, not just, this is what I worked on today, so I'm going to add it to the bottom of the pile, the bottom of the list of documents that's there. After working on this most of today and a lot of yesterday, it's very difficult to work with those Google folders. You can have one document, I can have one document open. I'm working on an iPad most of the time. I gave up and switched to a computer. It doesn't seem to make a difference. I can have a document open, the minute I go and try to pull a number out of another document, the first document's gone, and I've got to struggle to figure out where that was and how to get back to it. I would appreciate just a pile of PDF files that I can open up and have all of them open if I choose to. But they've all got to make sense. If I pull my paper annual report, I can look at a document called an object summary. And it comes right down to the number that was on the warning, $52 million. A budget of $52 million for this coming year. So I know
And see.
that makes sense.
Yeah, that's the one that we're
Okay.
Yeah.
If I go and grab that same document off your website, it comes down to $39 million. And I know you're not making a $12, $13 million cut. So my question would be, what's the difference between the object summary that's on the website and the one that's in the printed town report?
The printed town report is all a whole rescinded budget.
Right.
Yeah.
But where's the equivalent
Yeah.
that now has a
We are gonna
$50
print
million?
things. We are gonna print things for, the 6th. Everything is on the website. I'm
You're telling us that there's a $2.1 million reduction in the school district budget?
Yeah.
The warning from the one printed in the town report to the one that's on your website, the pro forma, is 1 million something.
So part of the problem probably is there are different elements in the budget. There is the general budget, which is what the taxpayers need to pay for. There is also a lot of school district stuff that gets paid from other sources of income. So I think that may be.
It is all the federal grants, state grants, and then the tech center budget.
But
all
your
collaborative.
Your point is well taken.
You thought this was the object summary that I needed to look at. The grand total ties to the warning for what we're gonna vote on. You thought that was important for us to see, but you aren't giving us this object summary now. It doesn't exist.
It will. Get it out.
So I started to look at the one that's on your website, thinking that I was gonna try to figure out where you were making cuts and what I thought of the cuts you were making. And I then realized the whole thing totaled to a completely different number, $10 or $15 million off what I would have expected. So I stopped. I left a message for you yesterday asking that question, never got a call back.
Yeah, I have a whole slew, because I've been in meetings all day and.
Well, it's gonna come time to vote. And I'm not gonna get an answer to that question.
Well, I will not say you will not get an average. We're going to get as much as we can to get out.
So as I tried to look at the schedule that's on the website, it looked like the budgeted increase for teacher salaries was something like 1.5 or 2%.
Very good.
But I don't know.
I'm on the website.
Okay, if you go to the very bottom, is that gonna be $39 million, $51 million?
39 million.
Okay, so what?
That's because this particular form, doesn't include the costs for the tech center, the collaboratives, and the federal grants. So I will make sure you have
apples and oranges.
I will make.
Nothing
sure
about school finance is easy or simple.
pretty obtuse.
So going back to the top of that schedule, I don't know if I can believe the numbers that are there or not, but the question I have is teacher salaries are increasing something like 1 or 2%. Administrative salaries, I think we're increasing something like
The same exact
10% actually.
Same exact amount, the teachers increase and
The percentage
principal.
increase.
In that contract. The principal line of this, the reason that's 135,000 is because there is a new administrator in this budget at the high school.
The second superintendent.
No, the second superintendent was taken out.
Okay. Something doesn't compute. Also,
No, there's an additional position in the budget. It's not the increase, it's the increase in that total line. So if the administrators increased or decreased, you'd see that line go up and down.
okay, so in a time when we're taking millions of dollars out of our budget, we need an additional administrator at the high school.
Well, yeah, that's been the need. I mean, we have 3 administrators at the high school, and the recommendation was made to have a dean of students and, instead of a athletic director or assistant principal, so it's really a shift. There's also an additional, there is a 3rd administrator at the middle school this year, dean of students at the middle school, so that's part of that.
Is there an explanation for the school board cost doubling?
Which line is that?
District officers' salaries. Go from 18 to 36. In that top section, the last item. Right there.
District officer salary, that's where he's talking.
Yeah, I see the line. There was no change in salary or anything else from year to year. So,
This whole section is salaries only.
Yeah,
no, the salaries. So we get paid on a per meeting basis. The rate hasn't changed last year.
So what are district officers? I took that to be the school board.
And so
yeah, I believe it is.
Yeah.
So it's going from 18,000 to 36.
No, it's actually, well, the budgeted amount was 18,000, the actual spend was 27,590. So that's why we brought it into line with what we're actually spending. School board members get a stipend for the number of meetings they attend. You know, for each meeting they attend.
And that was voted on from the floor, from the.
That meeting,
Was Saturday,
yeah,
that I wasn't here at that time, but I mean, I was
2 weeks
2 weeks ago.
2.5 weeks ago or so. Yeah,
right.
and it did not change.
It stayed the same.
Yeah, so,
Two more questions. One is, I think Mr. Wells, you said in a communication somewhere in the end, I don't know where I saw it, because you're posting stuff all over the place, that there were 22 vacant positions in the current year.
no, there were 22 positions reduced, they weren't all vacant. The majority were vacant.
Okay. So where did the funding, where did the budget go for the 22 positions that were vacant?
That is, you know, it's part of the calculation at the end of the year, with the audit this comes, they'll do an audit of what you spend versus what the budget was. So there will be money left over that will fund balance. And, that will be money left over.
Right.
If it wasn't spent somewhere else in the budget, it's overspent. Substitutes or another one.
Right. Last question, this is the superintendent. Last week, you said you were going to ask your principals to put out letters explaining what the cuts would be in each of their buildings. I've seen a letter from Nelson Fogg and I've seen a letter from the athletic director. Where are all the others? Somebody mentioned a letter from the Wilder School. Where?
Yeah, each principal should have put that out to their staff and their school community. Now I've been asked a few times to put that all together for the whole district, which I'll do.
Yeah, it's not the Wilder school community that should be communicated with about those cuts. It's every resident in town. We're all gonna vote on this budget. I'd like to read all those letters and hear what all those cuts are proposed to be. Sooner rather than later.
And I can post that as soon as tomorrow.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go back to the $135,000. So 2 weeks ago, I asked you guys where that $135,000 increase came. And at that meeting, I was told that was administrator salaries and our salary increases and the additional DM students at the middle school. And today, I found out as the president that there is an increase at the high school of the dean of students. And for me, that means there's a lack of transparency happening with what the budget is and what is being cut. And I just want to let the board know that I have repeatedly asked for transparency about what the budget cuts are for a public facing document for what is cut. So yes, there were 22 positions cut. Many of them were unfilled. And I do think many of them were, I don't know if it was oversight or they were positions of people who had quit 3 years ago, some of them, that were still in the budget. And so I am super happy we were able to not cut people because of those, but also it leads to questions of the validity of the rest of this budget. So I'm concerned, and I know this is really hard, and I know more cuts are probably coming. But I have a really hard time talking to teachers and saying, yep, we're cutting X number of teachers, but we're gonna add another administrator. That is not, I mean, it's a student-facing position, but it's not a boots on the ground position.
The administrator that's added here is the administrator's raises, and it is primarily the dean of students at the middle school. The dean of students at the high school is a shift from having an assistant principal and athletic director. All year, I've listened to complaints about middle school behavior, mostly from the HEA and from teachers here. One of the things we did to address it mid-year was add a dean of students, and we're committed to that, helped tremendously. So that is what that is, though. I
So-
do not think it's a good idea to forego that.
I would say that teachers are, that was prior to the budget crisis. Teachers are doing more with less, and I do think administrators have to think in the same way. We have not made cuts at the district level, and we have not made cuts at the administrator level.
The administrators, the 17 administrators in the district to run a $52 million operation. I do not think we're overstaffed with administration.
I disagree.
So we have cut as much as we can in support staff of the administrators. That's why one of the tech positions was reduced. So any administrative cut would be a position with someone in it. So.
Yes.
Katie, I was just, a question that I had is, based in other school districts like surrounding that kind of are similar to ours, what does it look like administration wide in systematically for within each individual school systems based on grades? Like, what does that structure look like? Have we looked into others? As well?
It's not, I mean, I'm vaguely familiar with what the surrounding districts have, pretty similar to what we have. You're thinking we have more or less. Some have more administrators, some have less. The administrators, when they made the recommendations for the reductions, we looked at every position. So it wasn't just teachers or support staff. We looked at everything from A to Z in the budget.
So the increase of like the dean of students that was helped in the middle school before the crisis for the budget, was that looked into before it was in place? Like were there studies done before that was?
Before it was in place, no, we weren't in the budget crisis we were in a crisis with a principal resigning mid-year and a lot of parents.
Other situational.
Teachers concerned about behavior in middle school. And we added that position. It's helped tremendously.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Come on in.
In the packet, I appreciate that you, Dan Sarasoli, if you don't know me. I'm one of those experienced expensive teachers, I guess, that was referred to last time. But with that comes experience and knowledge about the town. I believe in your presentation, Sarah, I don't think the middle school was ever the high school. I believe the high school was always at the White River School and then they moved up. So you might want to check your facts.
I found it on the website, but I'll. run
Just
it back.
check.
I don't know, it wasn't.
I believe it was a middle school. Always, well, actually, it wasn't. It was a middle school, elementary school. Because I went there for second, third grade. So that's how you too, yeah. So anyways, I appreciate that you have the ESSER funds in here, but I also know that some of these positions that were created during the ESSER funds have now become dropped into our budget. And those positions, some of those could be looked at. I know some of them have been eliminated or cut. I think more of those should be looked at and cut. I am a taxpayer here. I've grown up here all my life and raised my daughters here, went through the school, whole 9 yards. I feel we are at a turning point in our district. 22 positions have been cut. Some of those have been empty for a few years. So we've gotten used to not having those. Some we desperately need. I'm gonna say at the elementary level, we need those positions and they are not gonna get filled. I keep bringing it up with our administration and I get nowhere. I'm also hearing that like next year, we have had, maybe it is a luxury, I don't know, but we've had an elementary, at the elementary level, a OT service that has been for our general ed kids, because general ed kids aren't qualifying for special ed, but they still need support. Our intervention, we are a Title I school, I'm saying it, White River is, and we have 1 reading and 1 math, and that's it for all this intervention. That's not right. Our kids aren't qualifying for SPED because that is going to change. That is changing amongst us. And yet we need the support. Add, they keep adding, like we're finding out today that another administrative position is being added. I think it's time that administration looks at their lives. And I know they're doing a big job. I know that. We are too, and in the drudge, I'm gonna say in the drudges. I am starting parent conferences. I had a parent tell me recently, they are watching our district. And they have little ones and they're looking. If the middle school doesn't get any better, they're gonna look to go elsewhere. We used to, and I said this before, we used to be an attractive district. Aren't. Right now, people are watching. We need to turn that around in many areas. I put long hours in, I will do anything for my kids. If I don't have a budget, I'll go buy it. I'll cut something from my own personal things to go and buy whatever I need for my kids. If I see something that will make my kids ecstatic, be it a book, be it whatever, I will do that. I've done that for 40 years for this district. And I just think that we need to stop and look. This is, like I said, a turning point.
Yeah, one of the things
Everybody
that
needs
comes up
to have-
over and over is the middle school, and that's exactly why we added the
Yeah.
reading student.
And I'm not
Not have enough
saying-
coverage to address the student behavior needs.
and
Now
I'm
we
not
do,
saying-
now I feel really good.
But I'm saying.
So asking us to
across
cut
the
it now is very interesting.
Yeah, I'm saying across the district, it isn't just the middle school.
Yeah. Well, and the
That,
two,
you know.
the two administrative positions we did add with ESSER funds, one is a director of clinical services, which we desperately need. We know that the clinical needs and therapy needs for students has gone through the roof. So that's not a reduction we feel comfortable making. And the other is a school social worker. We have one school social worker for the entire district, and she's doing tremendous work. And it's like, to think about reducing that, it's just sort of shooting ourselves in the foot, because the needs are already overwhelming, as you're describing.
But there's,
The high school has increased, many students over the last several years, and we haven't added another administrator. We shifted the ADs, because that job is too overwhelming. He's the athletic director and an assistant principal. It's really two jobs, if not 2.5.
but
The
that's,
idea this year was to separate that, say, you're the AD like we used to do with the teaching position, and we need a dean of students. And the reason we said not another assistant principal is because the dean of students is a school year position, not 210 or 220 days. So we kind of get the best of both worlds, save a little bit of money. So again, we studied all the positions. I mean, obviously, if there's a second round cuts, we're gonna have to review everything.
Anyone else? Anybody on?
Online? Let me just peek, see if there's,
Is anybody on? Or is it?
I don't see anyone online that has another.
Hands up. Okay, one more chance. Okay. So we'll go to board committee assignments and reports. I'll go first. Most of my reports come from the SBA and I send them straight to you guys. Also, Hartford Community Coalition and, again, a lot going on. We've got a lot of things that are planned and that we will continue to work. I try to get those to you also in the same format fashion. Hakori, Sarah, would you like to talk about Hakori?
Sure.
Sure.
HCORI meets on the first and third Wednesdays. We're actively discussing a little bit about the committee makeup and kind of how we want to move forward with that. We're working with Julia, hoping to attract another student member. Our current student is a senior and is brilliant and amazing, but we will lose her. And Juneteenth is the next big event coming up. I think that's it.
Thank you. So that's all I have for my three. You want to go?
There's no action by the policy committee. Other things have been taking your time, with respect to the finance committee. I met with the business manager for the district and to help pull together this report. So sort of seeing what the results of that were.
Thank you. Doug?
The tech center had a quarterly review and I had a conflict and I couldn't get it, but Tom covered it, so.
Yeah, a couple things. We did talk about the building trades program. There was, before we knew about the budget woes, we really had wanted to add a second building trades program that would focus more on restoration and renovation. But it just didn't seem feasible, prudent in a year when we're asking everyone to cut, to add a teacher to the tech center. So I'm holding off on that. There is some talk at the state level about creating a building trades revolving fund, which would be a fund that tech centers can access to pay for the materials needed when they build a house or they build some building. Right now, we have to figure out how to fund that within the budget and create sort of a bubble as we try to buy $250,000 worth of materials for a house that we're gonna build, and then we sell it, we recoup that money. But it's very difficult to do that in a public school operating budget. So it'd be great if they could come up with some sort of a fund to pay for that, and then we pay it back. There is some legislation pending, Bill 304 that's talking about a different way to fund career and tech centers. So we're kind of keeping an eye on that. It'll change it, to pull it out of the operating budget and management of a school district, and make it a separate entity. So that probably has to do with some of the comments that came up tonight, where is all that money doing? It's a zero-based budget, so if the tech center's budget is, $5 million, we recoup $5 million in tuition from all the sending towns and ourselves, so the amount that actually hits our budget is zero, but you have to, account for it, so it would pull that out, so it's a little bit cleaner, but create a separate entity for tech center. And that's pretty much it. We meet again, the next meeting we have in May, and it's all about the students and their portfolio, so it's really it's a great meeting when you hear what kids have accomplished at the tech center and what they're gonna do with the rest of their life and their goals. So, it's a good one.
Gary,
I don't have anything yet. I still need to attend my first community outreach, so.
we'll get you.
Our engagement has been all about this, so.
Right.
Once we get through the budget, then Gary will get a taste of what the community engagement committee is like.
Sounds good.
Public comment. Here's your chance again. Go, Colin.
Probably had enough. Oh, no.
Oh, no, we got.
No, I mean, from
Oh.
the budget, it would have bond, public comment.
This is a little different. You folks may be aware that the governor has appointed a new state head of education. Secretary of Education. Reading about her background gives me some concern. So I guess my question is probably for Nancy, and it's because of your relationship with VSBA, does VSBA take a position and lobby on behalf of that person or opposed to that person? Or what does the school board think of that person, and what are they going to do to influence the decision that the Senate's going to make?
Good question.
Not to put you on the spot.
No, thanks, Colin. I'll remember this one. VSBA is concerned. VSBA is concerned.
Is concerned?
Is concerned.
Thank you.
I'm choosing my words very carefully here. We are concerned, and yes, we hopefully can make some changes. Nothing is in writing, nothing is in stone. I mean, I don't know what we're going to be able to do first. We had a big, long meeting about it today. As far as speaking for our board, I really can't speak for our board because we really haven't discussed that situation currently. So I really can't say that our board is going to do this or that until we've had a chance to talk about it.
If you'll tolerate just another minute.
Of course.
I've been in the Upper Valley since the late '70s. When I had to be away, I was sent away, my job, my company, and I landed in Wisconsin for a number of years. And I served on my local school board out there for about 12, 13 years. I was also a director of the State School Boards Association, Wisconsin. Spent a lot of time at the State House, testifying before education committees. I influenced my board, my local board, to become more active, more interested, more vocal on issues impacting education in Wisconsin. This is This is when Act 10 was being put in place in Wisconsin, if any of you are at least familiar with that, which was decimating teachers and teachers unions across the state. Our district board spent a lot of time being aware of what was going on at the state level, contributing testimony to Senate and House committees, working with the State School Boards Association, directing our representative to that organization, me, as to what our board's position was on issues. And so I would encourage you, I think it's probably the default position on a lot of local boards to just put our heads down and not get involved in this kind of stuff. It's political suicide in some instances to become involved, but you should have an opinion. You should be aware of what's going on. And as a board, you should be taking positions and then promoting your position at the state level, talking to our legislators, talking to the VSBA, talking to whoever might listen to you. But it's really important that you do your best to influence state policy, state hires.
I appreciate that, and I completely agree with you. Part of my job, or part of my duties, serving on, as a liaison between our board and the Vermont State School Board Association. So I also serve on way too many committees, as you I'm sure would know. But once again, because we've really been in this, what are we calling this, the conundrum of all of the stuff with this, we have really been concentrating more on the budget, and because actually the announcement of who was being brought forth for that position was a complete surprise to a number of us. And that includes me, who is involved very much in Montpelier, and spend many hours listening to testimonies from the different committees. And oh, I agree. Yeah, I'm sure that at one point that as soon as we can get through this, because we really truly have been working hard, very hard, trying to figure out how to make a budget that works for everyone, for our taxpayers. I'm like you guys, I'm one of those taxpayers too. So it will affect me as well. It won't affect Tom.
Well, not as a
Because he
taxpayer,
doesn't
but
live in
every other
Hartford.
way.
But the rest of us,
The
well,
secretary will affect.
I'm kidding you. But the rest of us do live in Hartford. So, as for our Hartford taxpayers, we are in the same position as the teachers and the other local players out in our taxpayers out in the field. But I completely agree with you. That's part of my, how often do I send you guys tons and tons? I really do try to keep the board appraised of what's going on up in the House and the Senate, and what VSBA is trying to accomplish and how we're going about doing that. So I do appreciate those comments, though. Thank you. Well, you'll be a good person I could come to and ask. I could seek you out now. Colin, I met Colin for the first time, what, 2 weeks ago?
Yes.
Yes, the chamber asked me to be part of a panel that had four legislators and the school board. And Colin was
I just want to make sure Colin knows too, I am going to respond. I did get his message yesterday, but people in the community need to know what I do.
Yes.
And I basically work a lot of hours every single day, including the weekends. So I have 4 or 5 messages from people on my voicemail I have to return. I was here until 7:30 last night. I went home, ate dinner, worked until I couldn't keep my head up. I get up, 5:30 in the morning and start it all over again. So I have no intention of blowing anyone off or not responding to people, but I can only do so much. And then meetings back to back all day, lots of important messages I gotta return. One of the things that's been super frustrating for me lately is hearing, public comment is really difficult because I want to respond to every person, but we're sort of trained to listen and not respond. But it's hard because things are said that I feel like I need to respond. So Tonight I responded more than usual, but it's hard for me to sit here and I need to tell the community. And be confronted with questions like, I never talk to the teachers or I never respond to the HEA's concern. In the past month, so far in the month of March, I've responded to over 40 emails from the HEA. And that's responses, it's not just email. Things I had to respond to the president of one of the offices about. And that's every month. So I just want people to know that there is a lot of communication, there is a lot of back and forth between the administration and the teachers and the teachers union. And I take that very seriously. I work really hard to respond to every single person with as thoughtful and as courteous a response as I possibly can. I am only one person, I can only do so much. And I try, and I promise I will give you an answer to your question and everybody else that's in my inbox or in my voice. But I just have to say that it's been building the last couple of public comment periods, like, just an attack, and, that's not the way I operate. I intend to give everyone the information they need as quickly as I possibly can.
I have one more question for.
Of
We
course,
have
Sarah.
representatives, district from the state level at our warrant meeting on Saturday.
I'm sorry, say again?
Will we have, state representatives that, from our district at the warrant meeting? Because I know sometimes town meetings, they have, don't we have sometimes representatives? This is essentially an extension of town meeting, and since some of the comments, rightly so, have been directed at our representatives,
I could
That's something-
invite them.
think that'd be a great
really-
idea.
as a taxpayer, as a parent, think that's very important. Again,
They created a lot of this mess.
oh, absolutely, absolutely.
When you look at that tax form, study that tax form carefully, because you'll see where we have more students, we've spent less, and our funding is reduced.
And they represent us
Just figure
and
that
our
out.
needs, and we're not being met right now. Like the taxpayers of Hartford and the students and the teachers, there's a big disconnect. So I think it's very important that they are here, or they're there on April 6th to understand the frustration. It's a real impact, a human impact. I think we talked about this, our district is one of the largest employers in the town. So if we make more cuts, this is an economic, it's a student cut, it's social, emotional, I mean, it's everything, it's an economic cut. We're just gonna start, it's a town-wide issue. If your loved one works at the cafeteria and they hours, I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And then they can't pay their rent, they can't pay their board. I mean, it's just the ripple effects will never end. I think they really absolutely need to be there.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
Thank you.
100%. Between the two of us, we'll get them there, get some of them there anyway, okay? We'll do
They
that.
were here on March 2nd.
Right, they were.
Several.
Yeah. Any more public comment? Anybody online? Nobody?
Let me just check. No, there's a lot of people online, 13 people, but no one has the answer.
Okay. Then we'll go to consent agenda.
You have a
Appointments,
couple.
resignations, and retirements.
We've got a couple appointments. Jameson O'Neill, at the Wilder School as a special educator. And we have a couple resignations. Richard Campanaro, who's a, literacy integrationist here at the Tech Center. Michael Finley, who's an English teacher at the high school, and Aria Bergeron, who was an interventionist at the Ottaquechee School.
Do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I will make that motion, but I'm going to point out that I'm abstaining from the portion of it having to do with the minutes since I wasn't at the last meeting. But I'd like to move that we accept the consent agenda as presented. And we give our thanks to those members of our community who are leaving us. And welcome those who are joining us.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay.
Me too.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next board meeting is the budget and bond informational session on April the 6th.
10 o'clock at the high school gym.
I'm sorry,
10 o'clock in the high
10
school
o'clock.
gym.
All at the high school gym. Okay. Do we want to do, first of all,
And we
You
have a
wanted to-
brief executive session.
that's,
I did hear from our attorney that.
Okay, good. That was what I wasn't
Okay.
sure. So,
Like that. So,
we have,
Yeah, do you have that form by any chance? Nancy, the.
sorry, I don't.
okay. Give me
And I don't have my phone with me tonight.
Just a
so I
second,
can't
give
even
me-
pull it up.
Oh,
Thank you.
bye, guys. Thank you.
Right,
Thank you.
Personnel.
yeah. Yeah, no, I just need to look it up real fast, which I've done before.
Oh. No. Oh, this is here.
Ah,
Yes.
We'll have to remember it, so.
um,
If they do the meeting evaluation first.
You want to do that
you want
first?
that first? All right.
Go ahead to you.
Go with
Um,
that.
Here, why don't you do the evaluation?
There's a copy in your packet.
All right. Board was prepared for meeting, satisfactory. Board's time was spent on ends, not means, satisfactory. Each board member was given the opportunity to participate, satisfactory. Board treated all persons with courtesy and fairness, satisfactory. Board adhered to Robert's Rules of Order, satisfactory. Board adhered to its adopted governance style, satisfactory. Other.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Those relations.
Yeah. So I'd like to move, that we find that premature general knowledge regarding, labor agreements and contracts clearly places the board in a position of substantial disadvantage because the board risks exposing its negotiation strategy if it discusses that in public. And I move that we enter into executive session for discussing said labor relations and contracts under Title I, Section 313A1.
Thank you very much. So shall we take a break call, wait to,
Assemble.
yeah.
Thank you.